Let's see here. Okay. I think we're go. Okay. The reason, by the way, we're recording is we want to allow students who may get ill, hope that doesn't happen, and cannot attend a class, to do so on Zoom. And if you cannot attend live on Zoom, you'll be able to see the recording of the lecture. In addition, there will be students from other countries. Outside Boston is another country, but outside continental United States, also to log on to learn about how to design medical devices. Because I keep using the word compelling, we're in a compelling healthcare crisis now. Fortunately, you don't feel it, but the majority of the population of the world feels it. And designing medical devices that can be delivered to people throughout the world is maybe small, but an important contribution to solving that problem. So I'll talk more about that. On a practical matter, that device coming from the ceiling, okay, is the in-room camera that MIT runs to record lectures using a program they call lightweight capture lecture recording or something like that. And in addition, since we're on Zoom, what I'm going to do right now, I'm reminded, if I don't do it, you need to remind me. You need to remind me to launch the meeting. And okay, and this brings me to a point. If you have any reservation about being seen on a video or anything like that, email me, please email. The other point about the recordings is that for this class in particular, because there's some intellectual property, and we'll talk, you'll learn everything about intellectual property. It's kind of private. It's not public. Whatever not public is, that's what it is. And the reason is because some of you may find, as groups in the past have, that, you know what, you could file a non-disclosure patent application. And to do so, of course, the critical point is that there's been no public disclosure. Now, while there's some people from outside the class who may log on to view the video recordings, I am going to edit all the video recordings to edit out anything that would make it public. Okay, so that's related topics, and we'll cover that more, and I'll explain what that's all about. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, and the other point is this: is unfortunately this subject doesn't really lend itself to listeners, to auditors, because everybody who's here should be engaged. Everybody will be in a team. Everybody has ownership of something. There's possessiveness, but so that's why if you're thinking about if you can't register and want to be a listener, then I would say, you know what, not in person, not live, but the course content will be on in a Dropbox folder later, and eventually available in OpenCourseWare at MIT. Good. Okay. Now, let me go over some of the mechanics of the subject and some introductory comments, and then at 12:05, Professor Unas has some comments as well to welcome you and give you some background. Okay? Good. Yeah. So let me go over the syllabus. that is on the website, and I'll go over the Canvas website in a moment. The syllabus describes what it is we're trying to do, and there'll be some repetition here. There'll give me some repetition because some of the terms that you're hearing will sound familiar to you, but there's a specific definition, a working definition of why we're using specific words or terms. So there is, we'll be giving you examples how we're using it. These just happen to be a couple of examples of some figures from two past projects. When we proceed with the design, we're going to be doing so understanding that any medical device is going to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. And that's not going to have much meaning to you right now, but it will later. And it's not difficult to understand. It's just being led through the steps for what that means. Okay, I should say first thing, I have chronic sinusitis. I would love somebody to come up with a treatment, okay? I think I could come up with a treatment, but I got other stuff to think about, so you'll have to forgive me from time to time I wipe my nose. I don't have it's not a viral thing, but okay. Now, as you go through the syllabus, we touch on a few things. Not only the FDA issue, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment, but you're going to be writing reports. You're going to be presenting slides, and in so doing, let me tell you right up front about AI. Okay. So you're going to use AI. You're going to have fun with it. But you're going to come to realize you cannot rely on it. Okay, so the other day, I've been having fun. I have like 5 AI apps on my phone. So when I'm doing nothing, I asked AI the other day, design me a medical device to treat atrioventricular fibrillation. That was a prior, that's not one of these, but it was a prior course. So the authoritative voice, I always pick an authoritative voice, comes off and says, this is da 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 da. It goes through everything, but there's no design there. There's, So then I said, stop. No, this is what I mean you to do. But in the end, after spending just a few minutes, it was clear it was going nowhere. You should do it. You have to do it yourself to get an appreciation. Now, what happens is, what AI is valuable for, I see, is when I do a Google search, and I will do a Google search on everything you do. You say a word or two, I'm going to search it. And what happens is, what is useful is they have, AI Gemini come up. It's okay, it's helpful. It sort of summarizes what I used to go through all these papers and summarize. Okay, summarize it. Do I trust it? Yeah, it has little paper clips and you track through what that means. That's good. So you know what? I find it helpful. It doesn't hurt because we're not relying on it. I should say my first experience with ChatGPT, after one of the students in this subject actually introduced me to ChatGPT a few years ago, one of my first uses, I said, well, tell me about Myron Spector, Brigham and Women's Hospital. What do you know? So it comes back, actually says some stuff. I said, oh, that's great. I said, when was he born? Comes back immediately with birth date. Entirely wrong. Entirely wrong. Okay, a simple question like, what's a birth date? So that was healthy for me because I saw right up front, I got to be careful. Okay, now for the subject, what I think is what I would say in a helpful way, when you do cut and paste something from AI, just put in parentheses AI. Okay, you will be citing references a lot for the rationale for coming up with a certain design. The reference could be the cause of a medical problem, and in knowing the cause, there are targets for treatment, but you're going to reference that. And by the way, you'll hear again, many times I'll tell you, the reference to look for are those within the last 5 to 10 years. Because a lot of knowledge, new knowledge has been acquired over the past 5-10 years to really reveal what the targets for treatment can be. And if the papers are older than that, they don't have the benefit of that. So when you cite other references, journal references, as you normally do, you do that. All I'm saying is if you have passages that are clipped from AI, which fine, put them in and use parentheses, parentheses. Just say AI, okay? Because that's what I'm saying, I'm going to do it. The other point is, just for your information, you probably know, there are programs that will detect plagiarism, right? Plagiarism is a bad word. Okay, it just means cutting and pasting without giving due reference. It's pretty easy to check a paper for that. Authenticate is one, Grammarly is another. Okay, you may have to pay for them. There's some free ones. I put a couple reports from last year on it, and it pops up. There are like 10 locations in which there's plagiarism. Well, they're not that bad. I mean, would I really picked it up? I mean, sometimes the programs, it serves them to find the plagiarism. So, but it's something to be aware of as we move forward. Now, so on the mechanics, the grade, here's the grading. There's going to be a written quiz, and in showing you the grading and the syllabus and a lecture schedule, you'll get a sense for how this course has come to be structured. Professor and I have been teaching this subject, I think, since 2003, 20 years. So it's gone through a lot of updates. Every year it's updated, right? Newly acquired knowledge. So there's a quiz, and the reason for the quiz is try and get everybody on the same page, thinking about the same things. There will be practice quiz questions for you to see. You will know the subject matter which is going to be covered in the quiz. So it'll be clear to you. Then there'll be an oral progress report about midway through, and you'll see the dates on the lecture schedule, in which you'll give an oral presentation as a group. As a team, we like to keep the teams of 3. As a teams of 3, each person giving one piece of that, present. It's what you're thinking of doing. You may even have up to 3 options of medical devices you're going to develop at that time. That's fine. That's fine at that point. Now, the oral progress report is going to be immediately followed by an oral quiz. So while the 3 of you, let me just say 3 for now, are standing here, I and Professor Noss are going to be asking you some questions individually, each question, maybe 3 questions from each of us. And then we're going to give you a grade. We'll give you a grade for that. The questions can relate to your design. The questions can relate to the engineering principles underlying the design, maybe some biology underlying the design. And it's not necessarily the kind of thing you'll study for, except that in meetings with Professor Noss and myself in Sierra, before we get to that point, you'll have an idea of what questions we have. And we're not asking the questions to guide you. Well, yes, we're guiding you, but we're not designing it. We're not picking your medical problem. We don't want to intervene. We're not controlling that. But we're saying if you want to do something like this, great. Wouldn't these issues be important? So that's where we're coming from. And the important thing now to mention, since we're talking about the oral quiz, the reason for doing this is practice for the real world. Once you get out of Boston, once you get out of MIT, doesn't matter if you go to academia, doesn't matter if you're in a company, doesn't matter if you're in a startup. You are always going to be put on the spot, and you don't have time to study. You have to go through that experience at least once, actually many times. It's always going to happen. You could be working at a company and happen to be at a group meeting, and the CEO happens to walk in, starts asking questions, and asks you the question. You're put on the spot. And it just sort of, we want you to get that as an experience. So these are all teaching tools. That's what these are all. Now, the FDA report is separated. It's, I think, 10% of the grade. But we felt there are some issues related to the FDA regulatory pathway that you'll have to take that will be helpful for you. Helpful for you to put a separate report. It's not a big report, but it touches on the key principles. And if you go to work for a company, you know, if it'll come up, something about the FDA, if it's any kind of medical product company, and if you happen to mention, oh, you wrote an FDA report once, they will grab you. They will grab you, I guarantee you, because it is so important. And there are so few people prepared to deal with this kind of thing. Also, I'll show you later where it's also valued because it's a good employer. Then we'll have a final written report and a final oral presentation on the last day of class. Most of the grade, 50% of the grade, then it deals with the final design, both presented orally and written. And the guidelines, the format you will have. The format is already on the campus website. Somewhere it's there. Okay. Good. And then there's other guidelines you should read through here in terms of as we progress, what you should be doing, what kind of time frame you should have, what the schedule is. Okay. And any questions? So let me now show you. One minute. Just want to open the okay. I'm going to open the lecture schedule. And here, okay. So here I should have pointed out before. So here's the contact information for the three of us, and here are the dates. In yellow are the dates that something is due. Now, the first thing that you need to do relative to introducing yourself on the website is go to the campus website, and I'll show you in a minute where it is. I think it's called Background of the Students, and there's 2 Google spreadsheets. Your names, if you've registered your names, Sierra put your names on there already. And the first one just has the information about what course you are, what year you are, what your email address is, and what you are to include is some brief comments and keywords about your background and interests. So at a glance, we can all see what your background and interests. It would be nice, but we don't have time for each of you to stand up and we talk about, what they are, but we'll start out on the Google spreadsheets. The second Google spreadsheet is your suggestion for 3 options for a medical device. So within the first, let's see, we need to finalize that design and the team members by March 11th, but within the next week, you should be putting some ideas on there, what some options are. And we'll talk about where you might get those ideas. We'll talk about those in a minute. So you want to be doing that first. Now, these, you can see there's 4 sections to the lecture schedule. Some basic information to get everybody on the same page, I said, and then the written quiz. Then that's followed by a couple lectures on the FDA in advance of the date of the FDA report. Now, for the FDA report, even by this time, it's later in the semester, when you're preparing the FDA report, that device that you're choosing, it's one device, a specific device, the dimensions for which are given, the materials of composition, all that may not be your final design. The point here is not to think about, we're not grading your design. We're grading what regulatory steps you take to get that particular design through the FDA. So that's what we're after in that FDA report. And then we've allocated, because sometimes we needed 2 days for your oral progress reports. They're 12-minute oral presentations. They're concise. In this case, followed by by the oral quizzes. Then you'll hand in the FDA report here, and then the written design report is on the May 8th and the 13th as final oral presentations, and we will be extending the class time to at least 1 o'clock from 12:30 to allow time over. If you have a class after 12:30, let us know. But we want to do that, allow more time. We don't want to be rushed. And there will be a panel of at least, in addition to myself, Professor Nas and Sierra, there will be 3 or 4 others, probably 4 other faculty, the TLO administrator from MIT, who will be listening and grading. So your final grade for the oral presentation will be the average of as many as 7 grades, for 7 people grading it. Now, for this body of work, so this body of presentations, is occurring in parallel to your designing your device. Your device probably will have nothing to do with the topics presented in these presentations. The reasons for doing it this way is that we want you to benefit from the fact that there could be some actionable lessons to be learned from how devices are being designed for apparently a very different organ, because it could apply to yours. Now, even though in some case down the later ones, there's no time to incorporate that approach for yours, you may find, often you benefit because in the future, you've benefited from hearing about the approach used for solving a medical problem that's quite different than you were exposed to, but you may run across that later in your career. And we'll talk more about the various types of medical devices, notably the tissue-engineered blood vessels. Shannon Dahl and a few others are MIT graduates. Shannon, we didn't teach the subject. She was here earlier than we taught the subject. So she was here before 2003. She got a bachelor's from MIT. She went to get a PhD at Duke. While she was at Duke, she did the PhD thesis work on this topic. Her thesis supervisor and her started a company. And just a month ago, FDA approved that device for certain applications for vascular prosthesis. So she's been through it. And the other, Pierre Dramel, he was one of my PhD thesis students, and he was CEO of a startup, InGel. He's now Chief Technical Officer. They have a product, an injectable gel carrying cells to restore vision in people who are blind. That device, that's only been incorporated 3 years. That device will start clinical trial, it seems, sometimes in this first quarter. a very it's kind of a complicated device, you can ask him, was this a rewarding career? He knew, believe me, when he was sitting where you are, he had no thought of this. Okay, he didn't know that the opportunities for taking advantage of resources in the Boston area would lead to this. So there's a couple messages that come across from these lectures. Not only the technical information about what kind of medical problems there are and what goes wrong, but also how you can think about approaching it, and then also think about your role in doing that. And you can get advice from other young people who've been through it. So that's why it's structured in this way. Did I miss anything, Sarah? No. Okay. So, okay. Do you have any questions on this? Okay. So we're gonna come back to this also. So let's go on to. Let's go on to. Let me give you a few introductory comments. All right.
Can I interrupt while you're setting up?
Please.
Did everybody here sign in on this registration list so that I can update the list on Canvas for you all to fill out later? Everybody's got it?
Good. Okay. Okay, in the interest of full disclosure, so I've done work in medical device design. So it turns out years ago, starting maybe 40 years ago, I started working with a family-owned company in Switzerland, and there's a product that I helped develop, this BioOS in particular, that they commercialized, and I think I list here I've got royalty income for a few decades. So there's been some personal experience in working with existing companies as a consultant. Okay, when I was sitting where you are, I got my PhD from Carnegie Tech. Like MIT, it seemed like all the faculty at that time, that was a long time ago, there weren't so many no startups, but there were. Every faculty member consulted or had a consulting company. So I loved it. Right? That's why I wanted to become a professor to consult. So consulting with companies was fun at the time because I didn't like business. I didn't want any business. Things have changed over the course of decades. Nowadays, when you go to a company, existing company, most of the time, in my experience is, if you have them an idea, they'll say, "We love your idea. Go start a company, and everything works out, we'll buy your company." It's about startup. So, over the course of the past couple of years, I've started a company, InGel Therapeutics, a co-founder, right? A team, right? It's all team. Co-founder for InGel Therapeutics. This is the one treating retinal diseases, and then New Gel Therapeutics, which will treat stroke. Now, it's about patience. It's about patience. A comment that I make normally in the last day of class, I realize I probably should make it in the first day of class because I think about it every class. And it is that as I've gotten older, I get visions. And one of the visions I have is of the people packed into this room. You may see some empty chairs. I don't see any empty chairs. There are people filling the chairs, there are people standing here, and there are people outside looking in. Those people are patients. They're patients who've been diagnosed with a disease for which there currently is no treatment. Those patients, the only thing they have to hold on to is that someone will come up with a treatment for their problem. And the question I've asked myself over decades is, oh yeah, well, who are the someones? Well, you know what? The someones are us. You often hear, if you want it done right, you do it yourself. I mean, this is where we are. So every time you talk about a medical problem, I look into the medical problem. I'm interested because there's such a great need for medical for products throughout the globe. Parenthetic, I'll tell you this too. Whenever I think about a startup, the first thing I think, let's do a nonprofit. It doesn't have to be profit. It can be a nonprofit. And you go through the calculus. There's some exceedingly successful nonprofits. I mean, nonprofits who have products, a lot of products. And I've talked to CEOs, and yeah, it's been very rewarding, okay? And they make a lot of money. I mean, their salaries are good. It's not like there's equity in revenues, but you can make a lot of money, and it's very rewarding. And especially when we come to issues of access, which I'll mention again, we're not talking only of people in the United States. It's throughout the world. And it's for getting a product to somebody in another country, you have to be creative sometimes. And sometimes the best way to do it is a nonprofit. Okay, so just come. Now, so when it comes to design, I want to be specific now. When it comes to design of medical products, okay. When it comes to design of medical products, we're talking medical devices. It's a common term, but I want to say it's a special term because we're using that term based on the FDA categories of medical products. There are 3 categories: drugs, biologics, and medical devices. And we're going to go through, you'll see a little bit more of a definition in a moment. So we're talking about medical devices. And the reason for having / implants is there can be medical devices that help patients that never get in the body. We want to get something in the body because it's a good learning experience. You have to deal with certain issues when you break through the skin that you don't if you don't break through the skin. So that's why it's a good learning experience. Now, the design has got to be a novel, implantable, or injectable. We're using those 2 words synonymous. Okay, injectable, implantable. Sorry. The design with that reason has to have a reasonable expectation of working. It's not research. We're not, and I'll explain. I'll define research in a moment. It's not research. There's an engineering endeavor to get something done. Now, you may want to call it development, but we'll be clear about that. The design problem has to be from the student team. There are other subjects in both at MIT and at Harvard that are designing medical products, but the ideas come from the medical community. That's not where we are. I'll mention more about this. I'll mention more about this later. It's not an incremental improvement of an existing device, okay? Using FDA vernacular, it's a class 3 device, not a class 2. FDA has 3 classifications, 1, 2, and 3. 1 is like eyeglasses or something, gloves, surgical gloves. It takes almost nothing to get approved. 2 is based on the fact there's a predicate device, a device already on the market. And your device is an improvement, but it's like whatever, similar to that device. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about one that is new enough that will require clinical trials. Many medical companies now do not want a class 3 device. They do not want to run a clinical trial. We want to run a clinical trial. We love clinical trials. It's good. Talk about intellectual property, talking about keeping out competition, that's where it comes from. Keep in mind, nobody wants to do a clinical trial, but they're very doable. So that's one of the points we'll talk about. No need to fabricate the device. You need a compelling rationale for the design features, right, with peer-reviewed references, less than 5 years or less than 10 years, something like that. And the document should be suitable as a basis for a startup and patent disclosure. You don't have to, don't write it like a patent disclosure, don't write it like a business plan, but it should be easily, you should be able to easy to cut and paste from it for either of those. Not to use a thesis topic or project on which you're already working. I love to tell students the reason is if you propose a thesis project to me, a PhD thesis project, and I'm going to sit down, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to do a lot of my own research on it, and I'm going to tell you, you know what, there's problems. You don't want me showing up at your thesis defense, right? It only came close to that. It never really happened. Okay, never really happened. But I want you to. I want to know that. I want to know that. Okay. Good. Okay. So just quickly, engineering, science, and technology. These words you hear all the time. Engineering is making a product using existing knowledge. Okay, it's a kind of different definition of engineering, but I love it. The key is there's existing knowledge. Okay, you use engineering principles, understanding that existing knowledge could relate to material science, mechanics. That's important. I mean, you're using your engineering skills. Science, on the other hand, is acquiring new knowledge. Virtually most of my career as a professor has been as a scientist. I'm an engineer, but it was like writing journal articles showing new discoveries. Hypothesis testing, right? You come up with a hypothesis. It was all generating new knowledge. But when you step back and say, okay, I'm willing to use other people's knowledge, anybody's knowledge, to put together a product, because I see those patients all over the place who want a product. They could care less if I invented the knowledge. They don't care. They just want a product. Then that's what we're doing. That's what this subject is all about. And technology is just the means of making the product. The more time you spend on the product, no surprise here, because you get a broader and deeper knowledge base for your design, and you become aware of publication. So that's, you know that. Now, we have Professor Anas and I have taught, there are 4 subjects we created. I'm sorry. And right now we're teaching in the fall term tissue engineering, organ regeneration, and you see here the notable features of each of these 2 subjects. Now, this subject from the fall, all the lectures are recorded, all the course content is there, it's all in a Dropbox folder, the link to which is on the campus website. So as you're going through your design, if certain things come up, you can take a quick look at the lecture schedule from the fall subject, and you can watch the lecture if you want. You can see what the slides were like. So we want to give you as many resources as possible to utilize. So that's available. And before the end of this term for this subject, the same will be true for these other 2 subjects that we no longer teach, but we want to make the subject matter available. You know, there are lessons to be learned from various topics and processes, and those lessons can lead you to action. So we're calling them actionable lessons. So, for example, when you think about the reason for dysfunction, the degenerative changes with disease and aging, trauma, genetic anomalies, failure of surgical procedures and implants, it's helpful to take a look at that, of what went wrong in other organs. It's also instructive to think about wound healing, because whatever device you implant or inject into the body will incite a wound healing response. And that's going to really not only influence, but in some cases dictate what the response is going to be to your medical device. And it's doable. You can understand this. It's systematized, so you can take a look at it even though you don't have experience in this, but you'll be able to see it and say, okay, I get it, and this is something I have to be aware of. The tissue response to all permanent implant devices, we talk more about this in the fall term. There's a lecture about it. The point is, I have two, from time to time I'm going to tell you about myself, okay? I have 2 knee prostheses. Oh, by the way, yeah, I have 2 stents in my coronary artery. Oh, I have 2 artificial teeth. They seem to come in 2s with me. Okay, I'm good. I'm healthy. I'm fine. I'm smiling. Okay, so these are permanent implantable devices. I have 2 plastic lenses in my eye. I'm looking at you with better acuity than I had since I was your age through 2 plastic lenses. So there's a lot of pretty bad problems that can be solved with permanent medical devices. And whatever problems lent themselves to be solved by a permanent medical device, they've pretty much been done. That's been done. You certainly can improve them, but then that's important. But there are an overwhelming number of problems that people have for which there is no medical device possible. So there are lessons to be learned. Now, interestingly enough, some of you may come up with a device that's a hybrid, something that's permanent in the body and something that is going to go away, resorb, lead to some regenerative response. Whatever is permanent in the body, whatever there is, sitting there, elicits a response that is the result of wound healing. And the response is always a fibrous tissue capsule, always, virtually always. There's one exception in bone. And there's a reason for it. The cell biology is now well known. Okay, so if you say to yourself, the performance of a medical device, and I'm thinking about, is going to be reliant on having a thin fibrous capsule, not a thick one, then there are ways you can do it. You now know what the targets for treatment are, how to result with a thin fibrous capsule instead of a thick one. So that's, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. What are the biological processes that cause scar? And the reason for talking scar or fibrotic tissue is that the end result of a surgical procedure, the end result of trauma, the end result of a lot of degenerative diseases is based on the fact there's only 2 pathways that it'll go. Either you end up with regeneration or you end up with repair, the word repair. But the word repair, the product of repair, is fibrous tissue, is scar, fibrosis. It occurs a lot in the body. So much so you wonder what's going on here. And now we know where the source is of the scar-forming cells. And the source is endothelial cells or other epithelial cell types. And we're going to touch on this as well because you may find a medical problem you want to work on, and a fibrotic condition, fibrotic lesions play a big role. You're golden. We can get rid of that. If it's already there, there's a very plausible way of treating to break down that fibrous tissue. If it's high risk for forming fibrous tissue, there's a number of antagonists to that process, so you can inhibit fibrous tissue from forming. And it's so we want to know how to prevent it or combat it, or how to harness the process. You may want to direct fibrous tissue to form in a certain location. There are sources of regenerative cells, and how to harness them. Our brains. believe it or not, have stem cells in our brains. But they're located just right on the border of the ventricles, in the middle of the brain. And it turns out that if you have a stroke, there's evidence to show that those stem cells start proliferating and actually migrating to the stroke lesion. But when they get there, there's nothing they can do. So you might think of a device to put into the stroke lesion that will enable those stem cells to do what they could do, which is form new neurons. So that helps to know that there's stem cells there. And again, this is knowledge that has been acquired, and it's now just a matter of let's use the knowledge. And the same with growth factors, right? It's not only the cells, but growth factors, of course, stimulate the cells to do different things, right? The cells need the cues that they get from regulatory molecules like stem cells. Also of great importance is that there are opportunities to enhance the effectiveness of drugs and biologics maybe already be on the market by changing the route of administration from systemic to local. Virtually all the medical problems in this subject are going to be local. Something is wrong in an organ or tissue at some location. It's not a generalized systemic disease.
There it is.
Yeah, let me see. Not a generalized systemic disease, and so when in some cases you can take that drug or biologic that was given systemically, and sometimes cells for treating a localized lesion are infused into the circulatory system. Just because some of them will get out that location, but what happens to the rest of them? They're out the patient's whole body. So there are a lot of opportunities for doing that as well. Okay. Now, your approach toward conceiving the design, right, you'll get leads from internet searches, peer-reviewed journal publications, right, you'll look at those. We mentioned the three categories of devices from FDA, and the FDA medical devices, and the others as well, have really a fourth category now, combinatorial products. So if you have a medical device that is releasing a growth factor or containing cells, that is, you have two different categories of devices, you have products in two categories, it's a combination device. So there are ways of dealing with it, and we're going to talk more about that as we move forward. So here we're talking about some of the distinctions of the functions in the case of the medical device. Well, the functions a medical device can play more or less on its own or as part of a combination device, which includes the controlled release of a drug or biologic. Okay, so that's what we're thinking about. You can look. Now, one of the points here, while we just see it right here, you're going to see it more particularly on Thursday, tissue versus organ. A tissue is just simply a structure made up of cells of about the same type. There's a common feature, they have a common extracellular matrix, so that's one. An organ is simply a structure made up of two or more tissues. So it's a more complex structure. Okay, why the need for medical devices? I'm going to give you some just some introductory material, and again we'll add to this as we go. And it's a really more for motivation. I want to keep your interest up. Let's talk about aging, causes of dysfunction. Let's talk about aging. These are some statistics. Okay, it's good. People are living longer. Look at this. Half of the 5-year-olds now, half of them are going to live to be 100 years old. That's from the Stanford Center of Longevity. Okay, that's pretty good. but we're going to talk about what the challenges are. Okay, so but just imagine that every person living in the United States is over 60 years old. I mean, can you? I get a smile on my face every time I think of all my old people there. You know, the whole room is filled with people over 60. Everybody's a senior, right? Go outside, everybody in the United States. But then you start getting chills. You know, your parents, your grandparents, they have problems that they seem to surface now in older age. Can you imagine the number of problems they're going to have to be presented with? Huh? A lot. Well, it turns out that that's the number of people right now in China that are over 60. 400 million. And by 2060, it's estimated 30% of the people in the U.S. will be greater than 60. Now, these statistics change some, so there's a reference somewhere for these statistics. But the bottom line is there are a greater percentage of older folks now coming up. And there are problems that the people, this population has that will need to be dealt with. Right? People begin living longer, but with reduced quality of life due to disability and pain. Not only do we need longer-lasting medical products that are permanent, like knees, artificial knees, but we need regenerative medicine solutions for the treatment of the lesions at the earlier stage, and treatment of patients at an advanced stage who can't tolerate surgery. So the reason I need 2 artificial knees now is when I was your age, I tore a meniscus in one knee. And then later, a few years later, I tore the other meniscus playing handball. At the time, their treatment for a torn meniscus was to remove the entire meniscus. I mean, it's horrible thought. That's what they did. Now, at the time, they told me sort of, you'll be okay, and I was okay. I lived the next 30 years, 40 years fine. But eventually, osteoarthritis kicks in. Okay, so back then, who worried about what's going to happen in 3 decades in your life? 30 years later. But now, if these 5-year-olds are going to live, half of them are going to live to 100. This arthritis is going to could kick in when they're just 60. And it's debilitating. And even if they get a knee prosthesis in a person who's 60 wants to be active may only last 20 years. So that means by 80 they need a second one. So there's a lot of dynamics there that are really pointing to the need for treating the conditions earlier on, but treating them in a way that will not lead to more degenerative changes. And you can take a look at some of these things about older Americans. And the point here is, for some designs, you want to factor into the design minimally invasive surgery or injectability. Because so many of the patients in need may not be able to tolerate surgery. And also, if you're thinking about outside the United States, there are no surgeons. There are not enough surgeons in the United States now. Not enough. When you look at joint replacement, there are entire hospitals that are just joint replacement. And they're just not, you can't just simply start educating more orthopedic surgeons. It doesn't happen that way. So this is a crisis. That's why I'll be referring to the healthcare crisis. This is one feature of the crisis. So how do we help deal with the crisis in some way? Well, let's come up with medical devices. In some cases, not all of them have to be this, but in some cases, can be administered, by people who are not surgeons. Maybe injected in a way. Now, the causes of a lot of dysfunction, and I'm going to just give a few more minutes. Relates to this. I want you to think about your own bodies, not looking in the mirror. We're not looking in the mirror now. Right? We're not looking in the mirror. We're looking inside your body. Do you know how many cells you have? I mean, okay, so it's stated here at the bottom, I think. Would you ever have thought you have 37 trillion cells in your body? 37 trillion. That's a pretty big number. If you Think about the amount of DNA in each cell. Each cell has 6 feet of DNA. Each cell, and some of those 37 trillion are red blood cells that don't have nuclei. But any cell that has a nucleus has 6 foot length of DNA that's undergoing chemical reaction all the time. 42 billion miles in me. 42 billion miles of DNA. I think about, okay, I don't think every day, but a lot of days I think it's miraculous. It's wondrous. We take our bodies for granted. It's terrific. But, big but, you cannot expect it to be perfect. You cannot have that many chemical reactions going on without some mistakes. And the point is, there are DNA damage. You either get damage or a mutation, I'll show you, as a mistake. Can you imagine 10,000 times per day per cell? Okay? Okay, so let's say you have 30 trillion cells. 10,000 times a day. And it's hard to get your mind around this. Okay, I don't want you to be frightened. Do not be frightened, okay? It's wondrous because what happens is most of the DNA can be repaired, but it's not 100%. It just means that there's nothing perfect. There's nothing perfect. It can't be perfect. It's too wondrous, right? So the thing is, there are going to be problems. There are going to be problems, and those problems really lead to what we see as medical problems that need solution. So it's been estimated that there are more than 26,000 medical conditions, 7,000 caused by mutations in a single gene, but the number of medical problems for which there are treatments is likely less than 1,000. So we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of stuff out there, a lot of problems there that need treated. And actually, on Thursday we're gonna talk more about this. The other point I will make is just closing this section. You can take a look too. There are a lot medical errors are a problem. Surgical errors in particular are a problem. And this not only causes new features of medical problems that need to be treated, but also leads you to think about devices that can be implanted or injected in such a way as to reduce the incidence of these medical problems, by way of trying to reduce the healthcare problem. Okay, I'm gonna stop there, and let me just good. I'm gonna stop the share.
Myron?
Yes, Yanni. Yes, okay.
I'm all set to go, except that I don't have the screen ready.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to just get back. I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah. Okay, I think you're very good. So, you have your slides ready to share?
I think I do, but I need to enter into the screen.
Okay.
Myron?
Yes, please. Yeah, sir.
There is an instruction here that says replace current share.
Yeah, okay, you can click on that. You can click on that, I think.
Click on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Are you okay?
Yeah, we don't see your slides yet. If you want to locate your slides and then hit that green share button.
Okay.
Well, Professor Yanofsky, getting you straightened up. On Thursday, take a look at the campus website. If you have any trouble logging on, let us know, please. And then we can just quickly go through it just to show you the content. And with them. All the slides that you're seeing in class are on the website. There may be some tweaking of them, adjustments of them, so I wouldn't necessarily go through it and download all the slides sets now, but they'll be up there for you to access, and as I say, some may be changed a bit.
You have my slides now?
No, Yanni, no. It looks like you have opened the part of the lecture schedule.
Yes.
Is that you want? Do you want to show the lecture schedule?
No.
No.
I want to go back to my slides.
So you might stop the share there, and then click on Share Now, and go to the other slide file.
Click on Share Now.
Yeah, and go to the other slide file.
I don't know how to find Share Now.
It should be at the bottom of your screen. You may have to shift your screen up.
You see anything?
No, not yet.
It says your screen sharing.
Let me just see. Hold on. Let me just see if I can. Let me make you a co-host. Maybe that'll help.
You see anything?
No, Yanni, I don't.
Because I have opened my slides, but I guess they're not.
No. If you have, you don't need to open the slides. Just click on them. When you hit the share, then you'll see your desktop open up, and just click on your slide that you want to show. It'll become highlighted in blue, and then go back and then click on the share again.
It says stop share.
Well, actually, yeah. Why don't you stop share and start over again?
How's that?
Yeah. No, we're back there. We're seeing you again. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you? We'll see about getting your slides. You can present them on Thursday. Why don't we do that?
What?
Well, you can present your slides on Thursday. Since there's some difficulty in your opening them now, we can figure out what's wrong, and you'll present them on Thursday.
Okay, you want me to sign off?
Yes. Why don't you do that? Let's take so Professor Nos will try and get that straightened out for Thursday, but this is the campus website. So here, for example, the FDA outline just gives you some headings that you may use, some topics, some aspects of the device you may want to look at. We don't want to give you a previous FDA report. We don't want cutting and pasting, because we want you to have the experience of going through this. Okay, I mean, listen. Again, whatever role, if you can come up with a medical device, you can. We guarantee you. If you need the money to incorporate at the end of the term, I'll pay for it. You can get it. You can get it. Part of that is having a team. You're going to have a team. But By the time you start incorporating, you'll get some people in the team not in this classroom. You'll get a clinician, maybe somebody else from Sloan School, maybe some other people. But you'll be able to do all that. But you want to understand the process. You may not be an expert in it, but you want to understand the process and go through it. So that's what this is all about. Now, then I want to let's then. Okay, so here's information about. I'm sorry. Here's subjects related, and by the way, here is the link. Here's the link to the Dropbox folder with the fall subject. Virtually all the subject matter is there and all the lectures. So you can take a look at it. Just look at the lecture schedule, see if it may be of help to you. And then I want to show you this one. So the FDA, the main facility is in Rockville, Maryland. It's nice. It's a nice place to live. It's very nice. Hundreds of PhDs, like yourself. Not many bureaucrats actually there. It's wonderful, and you're surrounded by other PhDs, and companies send you their documentation, and you read it like, I'm an engineer. Read it, it's good. It's actually quite enjoyable, and you're doing something really good. I still do it. So for 4 years back, a few decades, I was chairman of one of the external advisory panels that FDA has. They bring in experts from outside, and for 4 years I was chairman of one of them in general and plastic surgery devices. In fact, there's a meeting I'm supposed to be at by Zoom on February 20, but it was canceled. You've been hearing what's happening nationwide. Ouch. Okay, so I'm saying that now because the FDA was a good place to work. It was a good place to work. I'm going to tell you, there's always jobs. It's great to have the experience, and believe me, you go in there, you're a graduate at MIT, you go in there, even for a couple of years, they have fellowships, training kind of opportunities, and you leave there, people will want you for good reason. But here's the thing, here's what I want to get across. These people, they are clear thinking individuals. You have to be able to think very clearly. It's a great talent. You all have the talent. It's just given an opportunity for the talent to come out. So it's not just another regulatory agency. It's really valuable. That's my plug for the FDA. And then there's some other opportunities here. The MIT 100K entrepreneurship competition. There's nice opportunities, not only at MIT but also at Harvard for helping you along in the process of commercializing an idea. So that's good, and it's a good experience. I think it's a very good experience. Then there are other labs like the MIT D Lab that are engaged in work again globally. Now some of that is not medical devices, but some of it is. So I think that's important as well to see what other programs are doing at MIT, and also the program here in entrepreneurship. One thing about the entrepreneurship and business stuff, we're not dealing with that aspect. We're dealing with the engineering stuff, and that's where partnership comes in. When you're getting team members who know that stuff. Because once you start talking with investors, they use investor speak. so as an engineer, I got to tell you, I underestimated the importance because it's for me challenging enough to deal with the science and engineering of solving a medical problem. Then that was challenging enough. What do you have to worry about doing investor speak? You know, so it's a different piece. But you need partners. You need people to help. Then here are the instructors. There's something, some bio information about them. You're going to hear. I mentioned Shannon Dahl is an MIT grad. Pierre Dramel is an MIT grad. Christopher Love is an MIT grad, PhD in McGee. Matt Van Eman was here in the 90s, early 90s, graduated with a bachelor degree, went to medical school, then went to law school, took some business. So he's a partner of one of the biggest firms in Boston, McCarter and English, that does work with startups. So he's going to be talking. We'll have a little panel session toward the end about intellectual property. Because we want to touch on the basis. We can't go, there's not enough time to go in depth, but touch on basis enough to demystify these features for you. So you have some idea of what you're dealing with, because you can deal with them. You really can deal with them. Then these, for example, a student background and interest. This is the, oh, good. So some of you are starting to put your information on there. So what we're going to be doing in the coming days, we're going to allow some time to break from the lecture material and talk about you. Talk about some of your background and interest, and in particular, talk about some proposed options. There's already some options, that's great. Options for what you might be doing. Now, where are they coming from, these possibilities? There's a slide there somewhere in the introductory slides that we mentioned that it can be it can be personal. We don't want to invade anybody's privacy. We don't want that. But it can be personal. It can be personal insofar as not just you. It could be family member, something you heard once. You pick up the Boston Globe. Just look at the health section. They're always talking about a medical problem, or they're talking about a startup for treating a medical problem. So sometimes you read something, you read a term, there may be something you've heard. Let's follow through on that. Take a look at that and see, because sometimes there really is something that can be done. It could be, once again, it could be a journal article that you come across. So you can get the inputs various ways. And for these three options, just put it there. It's just an idea. So when we go through it, there's I think a helpful exercise to edit the options. What maybe rule something out that's just not ready for the subject? Maybe rule, what are the advantages of the project? Rule them in. So it's sometimes helpful to go through, and we're going to go through that editing process more than once. Okay, because the more you learn that it helps to show it's how doable it is, or how it's really still a research project. It's just not ready for a startup. And then finally, what will happen is eventually we'll formulate into teams. As I said, 3 people is a good number of people. One thing about the team working in teams, this too is absolutely practice for the real world. Absolutely. The most prized possession you have is your idea. And you can come up with a pretty good idea. And the thought you're going to have to share it with 2 other people, It's something, you know, you have to deal with. And it's good. It's good to deal with it. And you can do it, and you'll find often you'll find that your idea can be stronger. You can find that you can get help in editing your idea, changing it through talk with other people. Now, when you talk with other people, you're going to be meeting with Professor Yonas and myself and Sierra periodically as a team. Sometimes we'll meet as a class and talk to teams so that everybody gets the benefit of the conversation, but other times we're going to meet individually. And those individual meetings, at that time, the three of us will just give you some ideas that we have. And those ideas often will come because we will have looked up some stuff. Most of the time we just find the same things you did, but there may be other times we don't. The one thing about, and then before the end of the term, it may be well that you talk with the clinician, the user, to see practically how it may work. We don't like to start with the user, the clinician, to come up with the idea because of the practical matter that some clinicians have never been taught some of the cell biology that's now known and accepted that's been acquired over the past 5 years, 10 years. They were just never taught it. They didn't learn it in medical school. They didn't learn it in residency. I would say my home department is actually orthopedic surgery at Brigham. Critically important conditions in orthopedics rely on EMT, epithelial to mesenchymal transition, how endothelial cells become scar-forming cells. If I go to one of my clinician friends and say, who has a problem with fibrotic condition, and say, what do you think EMT is going to do? He says, I don't need an emergency medical technician. That's what EMT means. Okay, it's not there. So the thing is, that's why we have to be careful. We have to be careful because they're also understandably, any physician, surgeon, needs to have a lifelong educational process. They got to be learning stuff. What they learn in medical school is just the beginning. So that's why, yes, ultimately, absolutely, you will find a clinician who's on board and who can help in ways that are critical. But, that has to be a process, a work in progress. Okay. Okay, why don't we do this? Let's break. On Tuesday, we're going to talk more some about the background, that is, of our bodies in terms of the organ systems, the organs, the number of organs in the body, by way of helping you think about the different medical problems, and then we'll go from there. But please do let us know if you have any questions. Okay, Sierra, do you have any final things?
No, just the last call for this sheet. Did you get a chance to fill this out? And then I will update the Google